Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started. I know we have a few folks trickling in who are just signing in, but that's fine. We have a packed agenda tonight. I want to start by saying thank you for being here. Thank you to Suffolk for being a great partner, for hosting us once again. John Rishi, who many of you know, was unable to make it tonight, but he sends his best and welcomes you here. So on behalf of Suffolk, thanks for coming and thanks for hosting Suffolk, John and Lauren and team. Tonight we have a great panel, which we'll hear about in a second, and a topic that is among the most, I would say, requested every month. And so public safety obviously is at the top of the list. Close number 2 has always been transportation, traffic, pedestrian safety. A lot's happened obviously since the COVID shutdown. We've had a lot of bus lanes, bike lane conversations. We've had a lot of planning conversations as well with our colleagues at the BBNA in the city. And through all of those processes and months that have gone by, there have been a lot of changes in the neighborhood as well in terms of bus lanes, bike lanes, new forms of transportation, and that's going to continue to change and evolve. And so tonight, what we'd like to do is take some time with our elected officials, with our city leaders, with our public safety officials as well, and our partners at the Downtown Bid to talk about the state of transportation, traffic, and pedestrian safety here in downtown Boston. When we think about downtown, this is obviously a very large area of the city. It's one of the most transited both by pedestrians and by vehicles. Bikes are obviously a big part of the transportation base here as well. There are a lot of new networks that are being planned across the city, and that's not unique to Boston, that's across the country. I think what we're most concerned about here in downtown from a resident's perspective and small business perspective is how do you live together as residents, as bikers, as folks who still drive cars, waiting for the MBTA to start working again, and how do you make these things work in harmony so that we can actually have a functional transportation system that works for everybody. Our small businesses that are now part of our association, one of your chief complaints is, how do we think about commercial loading and unloading? How do we think about drop-offs? How do we think about getting food delivery out of our restaurants into your homes? And how do we do that in a way that's not causing miles-long backups and causing the bus not to be able to turn down Temple? And so there are a lot of considerations here, and I think the panel tonight you're going to hear from will try to address as many of these questions and concerns that you've raised. Many of you submitted questions to us previously, you've done it in the last few weeks, and you RSVP'd. So we've done our best to consolidate all of those. We'll have time at the end as well for Q&A. But tonight, it's a really important milestone event for us. It's the first time we've convened city leadership around traffic. I think for folks who've been in it for a few years, you recall during COVID with Mayor Walsh and Chris Osgood and the team, many folks are still, Chris and Beneath, for example, still in the city serving us and trying to make the city better in different capacities. And so a lot of the work that's happened, it doesn't just fall away during administration changes. We'll hear from our new chief of streets as well tonight about some of the progress that's been made and some of the challenges that we're trying to address collectively. But just acknowledging that there's continuity, there's a lot of work that happens behind the scenes, but there's still a lot of work to do. So with that, I want to say a couple of quick things. One, we are recording tonight. If you're seated, just the back of your heads. If you don't want to be on camera, just don't come on stage. Otherwise, it's just audio in the back of your heads, and the panelists will be recorded, obviously. We'll make this available in case you have neighbors who'd like to see the presentation, who could make it. We'll have this go up the next week or so as a video recording, along with some of the background materials that we're going to be reviewing tonight. I'm going to turn over to Matthew to say a few words as well. Matthew. Thank you.
So I'm Matthew Broude. I'm also part of the DBNA Leadership Team. I've met lots of you in previous meetings. Thank you all for coming out. And I think one thing I always like to remind folks, particularly after the merger last month with the DBNA, what was the Downtown Boston Residents Association and the Midtown Park Plaza Neighborhood Association have together become the Downtown Boston Neighborhood Association and the DBNA. As Rishi mentioned, that now includes not only residents, condo owners and renters and students alike, but also the small businesses, commercial properties, arts and cultural institutions, and our social services. And having run into some of you in the lobby, I know we've got good representation across the whole board tonight, and obviously the panel covers it as well. So I just wanted to thank everyone for coming tonight. I also wanted to acknowledge we do have folks from Councilor Gigi Coletta's office, Councilor Aaron Murphy's office, and of course we have Council President Ed Flynn with us tonight, as well as staff. I always appreciate all the work that your staff does behind the scenes, in addition to the electeds themselves. I believe we may also, I didn't see him, but I believe we may also have someone from Senator Lydia Edwards' office with us this evening. And as Rishi mentioned, we're certainly grateful to Suffolk. There are also some folks from Emerson in attendance. I also was happy to see people from some of our neighboring surrounding civic associations, the Mother District Neighborhood Association and the Wharf District Council, as well as the 4 Point Neighborhood Association. So I just wanted to acknowledge all those folks. Actually also saw a couple folks from the Chinatown Resident Association. Really appreciate everyone coming together, because obviously this is a holistic conversation about the whole of downtown and all of the neighborhoods around it and how they fit together. I did just want to give one quick reminder before we switch gears fully into transportation for the entire rest of the evening, that there is an election coming up on Tuesday, November 7th. Voter registration deadline for that, if you are not registered or if you've moved at some point since the last election, is October 28th, yes. And then early voting starts confusingly one day before that on October, which is why I was looking at the dates, October 27th, and runs through Friday, November 3rd. So there's that kind of weekend through week of early voting, and then election day itself will be Tuesday, November 7th. If you are on our email list, which I think everyone who's here tonight hopefully is, if you've RSVP'd, you should be, we'll be sending more information out about that. Did also want to announce we're going to be hosting an at-large City Council candidate forum on Tuesday, October 24th, which we're doing in collaboration with the 4 Point Neighborhood Association, the Mother District Neighborhood Association, and the Wharf District Council. So we're hoping to get good turnout. Wanted to let folks know about that now so that you can kind of block the time. We will be sending out announcements about that, and it is available on our website currently to start the RSVP for that. We'll be announcing some more details, including the location of that in the next week or so. I believe that is everything. Oh, and I forgot to acknowledge Chu. So, look at my list. We've also got Phil Huang from the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Services. We always appreciate you here. And I did actually want to mention too, so we'll probably forget to do this at the end. We do have folks from, I think, everyone's teams in the audience who are taking notes. The sergeant also offered, afterwards, if people have some quick questions on the way out, to stay for a couple minutes, like send you home to your family at some point, but I do appreciate that. So if there is anything that we don't get to tonight, we'll have lots of follow-up opportunities, and staff are taking notes from everything. I believe that's everything we want to cover.
Thank you, Matthew. A quick acknowledgement, Peggy, George, thank you for all your work. Mary couldn't make it tonight, Mary Higgins, but we've got a great team working behind the scenes to make this event possible. We're going to get started with the program. I'd like to ask our panelists, if you wouldn't mind, to maybe take a quick walk over to this side of a video we prepared to highlight some of the challenges facing our neighborhood in terms of pedestrian safety and traffic in particular. I think it's easy to talk about some of the challenges, bus lanes, bike lanes, people aren't compliant. It's a lot, I think, more effective to actually see it. So we've tried to get, it wasn't that challenging. We took an hour and we found a lot of good footage, and we just put it together. So with that, it's gonna take 2.5, 3 minutes. It'll go by quickly. There's some background music. If you don't like it, I can't change it at this point. So here we go. think that captures most of the issues. There's some other ones, but in all seriousness, I think it's just a lot easier to see that as the framing piece. We can talk about it. And again, the objective for tonight isn't to rehash that because we know what the issues are. It's to talk about where are we going from here. How do we think about the future state of this neighborhood as it relates to traffic, safety, and transportation, and how do we collectively, make that happen? We're also going to spend some time exploring some of the work, the installation, etc., that were done during COVID to understand what the data tells us, what the impacts have been, good and bad, and if there are any plans to rethink some of the changes that were made. So with that, I'd love to turn it over to Matthew to introduce our panelists, and we'll get started. Thank you.
So first off, I just want to acknowledge that there have been lots of concerns expressed by folks about the new accessible entrances for the Chinatown T station, and that there's been conversation about that. And I wanted to particularly thank Council President Flynn for helping to coordinate both DBNA folks and stakeholders, residents downtown, along with lots of folks from Chinatown. We've been having good, productive meetings about that. That is continuing going on. I wanted to acknowledge it up front because, as some of you folks may know, the panels that we have tonight are in some ways sort of tangentially interrelated to pieces of the T, but that part especially about sort of where the entrances and exits are doesn't necessarily sort of fit into this, so it's not nothing we're going to be addressing head on, but I did want to acknowledge that it's something we're aware of, we're working on. I know there's lots of people in the audience who care about, and then we're continuing to talk about. In terms of the format for today, as Rishi said, we're trying to approach this from a productive standpoint of trying to air all of the things that we're hearing from people, some of the things that we just saw demonstrated in the video, and sort of putting Jascha, I guess, a little bit on the spot to articulate the city's point of view. So we're trying to sort of represent the kind of opposing point of view, so to speak, right? The concerns or the skepticisms around what we've sort of seen so far, and the concerns about how the city's progressing. To try to bring that forward so that we're hopefully articulating the diverse viewpoints. And that's going to kind of frame, I just want to mention that because the association's not sort of taking positions in this. We're trying to sort of shape a conversation to hopefully yield a productive forum conversation, not meant to just be sort of taking one side or the other on any of these particular questions as we're going to kind of frame them. And I did also want to acknowledge, thanking people. We have literally received hundreds of emails, responses to this and previous forums, survey responses, over the last few months that we dug through when we were looking for questions that we wanted to do tonight. That covered literally over 30 plus topics on transportation, so we've tried to sort of merge all of that together. And we're going to give each of the panelists sort of an opening question, kind of a multi-part question that gives them some broad leeway to talk about their perspective a little bit on some of these issues. We'll give them about 3 or 4 minutes to respond to those, and then we're going to move to follow-up questions. We're going to try to move a little bit faster pace. Panelists, thankfully, we kind of had a chance to talk to folks ahead of time, so you kind of got some idea of what's coming. We're not trying to startle or surprise anyone on stage tonight. We are going to sort of put Chief Franklin-Hodge on the spot and kind of have you for probably most of these questions alongside some other folks. And we will try to save some time for audience Q&A at the end. And again, we do have people in the audience who are taking notes on behalf of each of the folks here. We have contact information for everyone, so if anything doesn't get addressed, we'll make sure that we can follow up on that. I believe that is everything that we want to cover, so I'm going to start. So these will be opening questions. Again, we're aiming to try to, I should introduce the panelists, I should do that right. Sorry, I forget that not everyone knows everyone. So up on the screen also, but Chief of Streets for the City of Boston, Jascha Franklin-Hodge, Sergeant Zachary Crossen, who is the Community Service Officer for the Area 1, which is all of downtown, as well as Charlestown, which you may talk about a little bit tonight in our previous conversation. Michael Nichols, who's the President of the Downtown Boston BID, a major partner obviously in the neighborhood, and of course City Council President Ed Flynn. We always really appreciate being out here. And with that, I'm going to start actually with City Council President Flynn. So you have regularly advocated for the maintenance of downtown, Chinatown, and other district sidewalks and streets, as well as pedestrian, cyclist, and driver safety, including the city's Vision Zero initiative to end fatal and serious traffic crashes in Boston by 2030. And as part of your focus on public safety, you've been a continual advocate for increased police resources, particularly consistently calling for hiring at least 300 additional officers every year for the next 10 years. So we'll give you sort of a three-part question to respond to around some of these major points. So what are your assessments of the progress of the city's efforts to rebuild our streets for greater safety, to prioritize a different mix of uses by incorporating dedicated bus and bike lanes, and to achieve Vision Zero? What priorities do you think the city needs to address in the next 12 months? And how do you see the role of police specifically for traffic, pedestrian safety, and transportation that works for everyone?
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you, Rishi. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here, to invite me here. I also want to recognize Vanessa Wu from my team that's up in the bleachers up there. Thank you, Vanessa. I want to thank the panelists as well, but especially I want to thank the residents of the downtown community for working with me, for working with my team, for working with the neighborhood association, city officials as well. I think looking at that video, the 3-minute video that was well done, we saw all of the challenges in that 3-minute video. And everybody is at fault. Instead of blaming someone or blaming the department, what I've tried to do, what I've tried to focus on over the last 6 years is to bring people together to come up with solutions to the problems that we're all facing in the downtown community, in the Chinatown community, the Leather District community, the Wharf District. So let me highlight a couple issues. On bus lanes and bike lanes, on pedestrian safety, I think pedestrian safety is the top issue in the city of Boston. It's these quality of life, neighborhood services, public safety issues that are critical. The level of speed we saw in that video, what we see every day, whether it's a vehicle, whether it's a bicycle, is excessive. I would love to see the speed limit reduced. I want to see the Boston Police Department, who I know they're terribly understaffed, but I want to see us do more traffic enforcement of vehicles and making sure that the streets and sidewalks are safe for everyone, especially our seniors, persons with disabilities. We see young families here in the downtown community as well, taking their little kids to school. Having said that, my job, again, is to bring people together to ensure the voices of the residents are heard by decision makers at the city level, at the state level. And that's something I'm going to continue to do, to make sure that your voice is heard in this discussion. Sometimes it is heard, other times it's not heard. What I also want to see is the critical role the Boston Police play in this neighborhood as well. You pay a huge property tax in this city. You love the city, you love the downtown area. I do too. I went to school here at Don Bosco High School. I worked at the courthouse. And obviously I'm the city council president. But we need to make sure our neighborhood is safe for everybody. And at times, I think the neighborhood is not safe for everybody. Whether it's in the downtown area, whether it's in the public garden, or the Boston Common, or Tremont Street. I continue to advocate for more police in this city. I've been somewhat successful. I continue to fight against budget cuts, $30 million budget cuts that were almost enacted recently to cut the Boston Police. We were lucky to get funding for intelligence, $3 million for the brick. Was a difficult victory as well. But this is about working together, listening to each other, respecting each other. We can have differences of opinion, but what's important is we continue to work together and to ensure that the neighborhood voice is heard in decisions made by City Hall. And that's my job, is to make sure that you are heard. And I'm going to continue to advocate for you as long as I'm the City Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Jascha, a question for you. So our streets are effectively a limited resource, right? And some of the decisions that we make on these streets are permanent or can be quasi-permanent and aren't easy to change. When we think about the various needs that we have, whether it's commercial needs to load and unload, or it's residents need to get dropped off, picked up, school buses that need to travel our roads, and all the new modalities of transportation, some of which we saw in the video. how do you prioritize as the chief of streets for Boston those different uses? And how do you achieve a balance? And I think from our perspective, representing residents and small businesses, we're acutely concerned about safety, right? And making sure that our residents are able to enjoy a high quality of life, and that our businesses are able to be viable, especially at a time when we're trying to rejuvenate this part of the city. So the question is, how do you prioritize all these different competing interests, seemingly competing different interests at different times, to achieve the right balance?
Thank you very much, Rishi and Matthew, and thank you for having me here. Appreciate everybody coming, and glad to be up here with my fellow panelists. So I will answer your question in a couple ways. So I think, as you say, there's a lot of competing demands on our streets, and I think we see this play out when you get 100 responses to your solicitation, your questions. It kind of reflects the fact that there are many different perspectives about our streets, about how they should function, about what should be prioritized, about what modes of travel are most important to ensure are accommodated. And so our job is to kind of take all of that in and to mesh that with a bigger picture and a longer term plan and a vision for how transportation in the city evolves, to think about the way the decisions we make impact growth, impact economic opportunity, impact our climate, and to roll that into a set of programs and policies that allow people to get where they need to go safely, efficiently, but also in some cases kind of put us on a path towards longer term change where that feels necessary or important to try to achieve. And we have to do that in the context of a world that is not static, right? We have obviously been through a generational disruption in how we move, how we live, how we buy things. The pandemic and all that's ensued, and we're still, I think, not sure exactly where all this settles. What is work from home going to look like in 5 years? I don't think anybody can give you, has the crystal ball to give you the answer to that question. And so we're trying to adapt as these things change. We're adapting as technology changes, whether that's the arrival of Uber, a decade ago, or the rise of food delivery apps, especially during the pandemic. There's new vehicular technology. At least one city staffer arrived on a standard electric scooter today. Those did not exist, 5-10 years ago as a thing you saw on our city streets. So all of this is to kind of underscore how much of a balancing act this is. I think but in order to try to do that prioritization, I would say there's kind of 3 big pillars that we're looking at within the streets cabinet. So first is really just looking at our basic infrastructure, right? And this is about the unsexy term is state of good repair, but it is important, right? Are we maintaining sidewalks that are safe and passable? Do we have streets that are drivable and bikeable? So we do a lot to invest in just the quality of the basic infrastructure that we all rely on every day. And that continues to be a place where we do some things very well and some things less well. And so we're always looking to optimize that and make sure that we are taking the resources that we have, limited though they may be, and applying them where they can deliver the most benefit in terms of just ensuring that the infrastructure we have today functions as we want it to function. The second big thing is safety, right? And really this is the first thing. This is the number one thing for us in terms of our focus and priority. We in Boston are one of the few cities that has bucked the national trend of rising pedestrian deaths and fatalities. We have actually seen a modest decline over the last 5 years in deaths and serious injuries on our streets. But there's more work to do, right? There's still thousands of people every year who have a life-altering and in some cases a life-ending injury as they go about their daily business on our city streets. And that is, we have to keep that as a core focus of the work that we do. And so we weave that into all of the projects that we undertake. Sometimes we do standalone safety projects that are designed to address a particularly dangerous and risky intersection. Sometimes we do policy changes like the new signal operations guidelines that we released earlier this year, which make some adjustments to how we program and prioritize and time our signals to focus on pedestrian safety. But a lot of that work happens in the sort of normal course of business, and we think that this is actually the right way to do safety, right? It's not a special program. It isn't the Vision Zero office that worries about keeping people safe. It's everyone. It's any time we change the design of the street, we look at what opportunities exist to shorten the crossing distance for pedestrians, to adjust the sight lines so that people have better, everyone on the road has better visibility, to create physical separation between different modes of travel, to do the kinds of daily small tweaks on a roadway that ultimately add up to a safer city. And that daily work is how we've gotten to see this decline in fatalities over the last 5 years. The last pillar that we look at is mode shift, and I think this is probably in some ways the most controversial, or the one that gets the most heated discussions in community. There's a few reasons that we want to see fewer trips taken by people driving alone and more trips by transit, walking, and biking. The first is that we are a growing city, and our roads are not growing, right? We are space constrained. And if we want to keep adding neighbors, adding jobs, if we want the economic vitality that is the engine of all the things that makes Boston great, we need to be able to grow without choking ourselves off with congestion. And to do that, we need to make more trips by the modes of transportation that are more spatially efficient, right? If every Boston resident, if everyone who worked downtown drove here in a car, there would be no downtown. It simply could not function. So Boston only works when our transit system works, when people have options, when we can create safe alternatives to driving. Now that does not mean that everyone needs to drive, or everyone can drive, or everyone needs to take transit or ride a bike or do something other than driving, right? It's for many people, driving is the only option or the right option for them, and we know that. But it's about long-term change to the balance of the transportation mix. The last thing I'll say on this is, putting aside the kind of practical realities of growth and the need to be able to keep adding jobs, we are in the midst of a true climate crisis, and the downtown neighborhoods are sadly on the front lines of that, or will be, as rising sea levels and increasing storm intensity means more flooding, more disruption to everyday life here. And transportation is the second largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in Boston and the largest source nationwide. So finding ways to move, to keep our economic vitality, to keep the strength of our business community while putting less carbon in the atmosphere is absolutely crucial to the long-term health and survival of this city. And so mode shift is one of the ways that we can help to bring down the intensity and the impacts of our transportation on the planet.
Thank you, Chief, and we will certainly be digging more into mode shift. Come back to that in a minute. But in the meantime, I want to turn to start with Zachary Crossen. I had a great conversation. Thank you again for chatting for so long yesterday. We really did this entire forum by ourselves. So enforcement of traffic and parking infractions is one of the most common questions from residents and business owners alike, whether it's drivers, cyclists, people on scooters and mopeds, even pedestrians. I think we saw everything sort of demonstrated in the video. There are issues with everyone in every mode of transportation, whether it's on the street or a sidewalk or Boston Common pathways. Really issues everywhere with people who are not complying with laws or exercising consideration of others in cases. And I had originally written residents often complain about dangerous near misses, but actually heard from a resident earlier tonight about actual collision with a cyclist hitting a baby stroller crossing Tremont Street a couple weeks ago. So we're meant to that to say not just near misses, but also actual impacts as well. Given sort of all that context, what is the Boston Police Department's role in enforcement for drivers, cyclists, and other users of our streets and parks? And which other city departments and agencies play a role in enforcement? How do information campaigns and awareness figure in proactive enforcement? Given limited resources, how does the Boston Police Department prioritize where and how to focus enforcement efforts? And can you provide specific stats for enforcement, running stop signs and red lights, parking, other vehicular traffic infractions, as well as cycling infractions?
Awesome, thank you. Well, again, thank you so much for having me here today. I think this is a wonderful opportunity for the police department, along with the other panel members, to show some transparency in how we do our decision making for public safety involving transportation safety. Obviously, we saw a significant number of traffic violations, right, committed by tractor trailers and cars, buses, bicycles, and pedestrians alike, right? So, voluntary compliance is the cornerstone of civil motor vehicle infraction and parking regulation, right? So even in the state law that talks about Chapter 90, which talks about the laws governing the operation of motor vehicles, voluntary compliance is the goal. It's not to issue as many citations as possible, it's not to write tickets, it's not to make summonses, it's voluntary compliance. So you get in that car, you automatically put your seatbelt on because that's just what we're supposed to do. Same with stopping at red lights and maintaining marked lanes, staying out of lanes you don't belong in. It's very challenging, and like Councilor Flynn said, and again, thank you for your steadfast advocate for our department, for our budget, and for hiring more people. We can't be all places at once, right? So the Boston Police Department, especially downtown, we cover from I-90 in to the waterfront, Charlestown, and then from the Commons and the Gardens over to the wharf. And it's a significant amount of space, very densely packed. You see, we even get stuck in some of those traffic jams as well. If we're getting stuck, that means so is the fire department, and so is EMS, right, our emergency medical, right, which is very important to get to our hospitals for injured persons. So what is our role? Our role, we prioritize based upon need. So if we're seeing a certain area is having a lot more accidents, a lot more instances of blatant disregard for some of our motor vehicle laws, for blatant blocking the box, for example, at rush hour, right? You didn't make it through that light 3 times, so you're just gonna go, and now you're stuck at the middle, and everyone's got their horn, right? So we will try to address those as best as possible. The same officers who address those concerns are also the ones who are responding to the missing 5-year-old that got lost in the Commons, separated from a group trip, person with a knife, emotionally disturbed person, a drug dealing complaint. It's the same officer responding to those calls as is the traffic calls. So we ask for your understanding that we can't be all places at once. I have some stats here that I'll talk about in a minute, also some various use for whatnot. So I've been asked several times about, I think we'll get to a little bit later, different modes of transportation. Obviously vehicles, buses, trucks, then we have some of our bicycles, scooters, the one-wheel thing that I can't ride, but I see a lot of people doing them lately, right? When the laws were written, right, these laws, I have some of the chapters and sections pulled up, written 2001, 2004, the electric unicycle that does 40 wasn't invented. The electric scooter, some of these very quick scooters that you stand on weren't invented, or weren't popular. So how to take into account those? The laws that talk about the motorized bicycle versus scooter, there's a difference. It's very complex, right? Some are allowed in the bike lanes, some are not. Some are allowed in the Boston Commons, for example, public parks, some are not. And it's very confusing. So we talk about information campaigns, right? The city actually does a pretty good job. I pulled up on the city's website today to print out, breaks it down, what you can ride and where. The problem is getting folks to that page, having them read it, right? We saw a lot of people here, food deliveries on mopeds, people coming down just to go to work maybe, whatnot, that no helmets, wrong ways on one-ways, sidewalks. It's a little chaotic, and as a pedestrian, it can be pretty scary. I like to say this at all my meetings, I like to be a place for downtown where I can bring my wife, my 2 small children to come down to tree lightings and for shopping and for the aquarium, for example, and have it be a place that they feel comfortable walking around. Not just me as a police officer in the uniform and the hat and all that, but to bring my family. So when we talk about this stuff, it's very personal that we have a plan, we enforce properly, we have a plan that suits everyone's needs, and really does look at the safety of, say, the woman with her stroller, our elderly that may not be able to run across the street as fast, or somebody who's just, right, headphones are in looking down at their phone, that may not be paying attention. In addition to just the Boston Police, we're multi-jurisdictional down here. We do have our partners at the Transportation Department, and I want to say, if you get a orange ticket that didn't come from the police department, don't yell at us. Okay, I get them too, I just pay them, right? So One of the hardest things today was finding a place to put my car outside of a transportation forum and be legal, right? Very challenging downtown. So the police department issued blue tickets that are handwritten. BTD, the transportation department, issues orange tickets that are printed. Their primary function, and I'll say primary function, is the enforcement of parking laws, right? So hydrants, handicap spaces, no stopping, no standing, loading zone only, idling, things of that nature. And as I talked about earlier, our resources, the same officer who's going to give that citation for no parking, no hydrant is also the same one who's responding to a domestic violence call. So we work with them. In addition, and I'll leave it at this, is other agencies like the state police who maintain who have a presence in some of our streets here, right? We're not all just Boston streets. The MBTA, right? We drive up, the MBTA runs on the road. The MBTA police does have jurisdiction. If someone's, say, parked in the bus lane, they can issue a citation for that. So we're not alone here. I'll just give you quick stats. So Temple Place always comes up. There have been 101 calls year to date for illegal parking, just 911 calls, 101 calls for illegal parking just on Temple Place. In the last 71 days, we've issued, just in downtown Crossen, mind you, that's just our station, A1, 274 parking citations and 32 civil motor vehicle infractions. Officers have a thing called discretion, which allows them to either do something or not to do something and everything in between. Anything from, say, a verbal warning to an arrest, right? Our officers work very hard, and I've done it personally. If someone's illegally parked, before we tag them and sometimes tow them, we have the benefit as police is running the plate. There may be a phone number associated with that plate number in a report somewhere. We can call and ask them to come move their car. I have a lot of success doing that. Knock on a door. That's something that we can do. We can also, when we pull someone over for failing to stop at that red light, we can give them a warning. We can give them a verbal warning. We talk about why it's unsafe. If that's not getting a point across, or they have an excuse as to why that they should have been allowed to run the red light, maybe something like a written warning, or as far as a money citation, may help reinforce the point that we can't do that. That's unsafe. But to say that 32 may sound low, our officers go above and beyond doing either written warnings or verbal warnings, which can be very effective. And again, I think the message gets sent to the public. It also doesn't incur the motorist the cost of having insurance points and whatnot added. So there's many different options.
Thank you. Michael, next question is for you. I've had the pleasure of serving with you on the board of the BID. It's been great having you as a team leader. The BID obviously plays a vital role in this neighborhood and has for the last decade plus. And I think without it, we would all agree here that we would be worse off than we are today. So thank you to the BID and the team that's here today for all you do. The BID obviously has a very important mission, and to be precise, and you and the team work hard at this. The mission is, everyone here I think is familiar with the BID's mission and what the BID does, but just to put it in context, the actual mission, achieving the district's full potential as a premier and vibrant destination, and to significantly improve the experience of all who live, work, go to school, visit, or shop in the downtown Boston BID. The catchment area is large. There's a lot of work that has to be done on streets that are not all the same, and so unique block-by-block challenges. We have a pedestrian zone here in our neighborhood, which is unique to downtown. It's one of our assets and also can be a challenge at times. So Michael, the question for you is, as a district that has a pedestrian zone, what is your perspective on the opportunities and challenges that zone brings to this neighborhood? And from your point of view, to the extent we can innovate and redesign streets, are there specific opportunities that you have an eye on that might enhance quality of life and vibrancy of our neighborhood?
Sure. Pleasure being here. Thank you for having me. Good evening, everyone. I take a lot of pride in the neighborhood that we are all in today. I sort of take to viewing this job as being a temporary steward of an asset, and being one of, along with my colleagues, sort of this generation's stewards of BID and of downtown. And those that came before us had the great foresight to not only establish the pedestrian zone, but really phenomenal linear assets like the Freedom Trail, one of the real pioneering walking trails in America, the downtown Boston pedestrian zone being one of the real wonderful pedestrian zones anywhere in America. And so to have those kinds of assets is a boon to us. And frankly, anything that's good for business is good for residents and vice versa. Right? I think we are all after the same goals in downtown. That said, and the chief and I have had a number of conversations about this, We built ourselves one of the best pedestrian zones in America, but really at no time ever with the appropriate infrastructure or enforcement mechanisms necessary to have it realize its full potential. So there are some really productive conversations ongoing right now between the city and others interested in this topic in how we can improve the pedestrian zone in its next generation and for generations to come to achieve the purposes that were laid out for it. But even as it functions today, there's a lot of positivity around the business climate, visitors, tourists, those that experience the downtown pedestrian zone. We take great pride in the fact that the bid this past year will have produced something like 1,300 free events in the downtown, most of those being in the pedestrian zone, along Summer Street, over by the steps, roving performances of music. The Temple Place block party earlier this summer, a number of block parties in Summer Street, and so on. Harbor Fest, and we were hoping for a couple of championship parades this year. Unfortunately, the Bruins and Red Sox and Celtics and Bruins, all those guys did not help us out. But we take a lot of pride in activating that public realm on your behalf and on all those that can visit Boston at any time. So our pedestrian zone works, and it works really well. And it is by and large a safe place to be, a fun, active, and well cared for place to be, but one that certainly needs to see its next generation take hold. And so, I won't preempt the chief too much, but to suggest that we are quite supportive of the work that the city has done today to reimagine or to plan for the reconstruction of the downtown streets, to potentially enlarge the pedestrian zone, to make it bigger, to make it more functional for the way that commerce and traffic experiences the street today. We think there'll be some positive announcements to come, and it is prepared to play a role in accelerating that timeline in any way that's possible to realize those benefits even sooner. And if they involve changes to the way that downtown streets, and in particular the ped zone, need to be managed, and there's a proper role to play for our organization, we'll be prepared to do that. I think enforcement of that zone is key to its success. I think lessening the barriers that might frustrate the development of the downtown streets reconstruction is an important role that the property owners of downtown can play. It wasn't until I took this job that I understood what an areaway was. Something that may not be known to many, but these sort of privately owned spaces that jut out from the bottom of buildings below the sidewalk. That actually have a pretty destructive impact oftentimes on the quality of the sidewalk above and on anybody's ability to maintain it. And so, we downtown have a lot of course, the city's legacy buildings and 1800s buildings that comprise our downtown core. And so a lot of those legacy issues exist truly below the surface level. And I think our property owners are increasingly willing to be at the table to try and support solutions to those challenges that would make for a better public realm for all of us. But as we look ahead to the years ahead, I think we have to understand that the streets are for everyone. You have to put the public in public streets. They're not for any one type of user, any one type of business, any one type of stakeholder. They are for all of us, no matter your mode of transportation or your reason for being downtown. And so the bid is prepared to continue to work with the city to ensure that everyone has the proper access to a well cared for public realm environment. At our scale and budget size, which to some is large and to some is very, very small, we're doing our part. You will actually see a reconstruction project next week in the pedestrian zone on Summer Street. As sort of the lead programmer of that area, we felt it important that even at a fairly small scale for us to fix an area of broken bricks and a depression that I'm sure dozens of people a day trip their way through outside of Roach Brothers. And so you will see our crew and a contractor that we've hired make a modification to that area next week in 3 days to try and smooth out that one small area of the pedestrian zone. That's sort of an example of how we have care and concern over this area and are excited about talking to stakeholders about how to extend positive impacts to the pedestrian zone more broadly, which is that.
Thank you, Michael. So we're going to transition format slightly, just as a reminder. So everyone's having an opportunity to talk a little bit longer. We're going to ask much more specific questions now and follow up and try to kind of dig into all the details. As discussed beforehand, Chief, you're sort of, I think, on the hook for maybe all of these questions, and then we'll sort of try to identify, folks that we think are going to be kind of a good companion for you on some of these. And again, we're trying to sort of express the variety of concerns and skepticisms in particular that we've heard, hoping to give you an opportunity to kind of articulate your thinking and how you kind of address those as we're trying to sort of move to a better, more nuanced version of the streets that work for everyone. So with that, I think this is probably a Sergeant Crossen combo question maybe for you. So we obviously do hear some praise after the cessation of bike lanes in the past few years. I know I've talked to lots of folks in the audience, lots of people here who use bike lanes regularly, but obviously also do hear lots of concern from residents and business owners that they're skeptical of or outright opposed to bike lanes, often based on safety concerns or a sense that they take up more space than their usage warrants, or that their design and upkeep is lacking. Obviously, I referred earlier to the incident with the strike on Tremont Street. Saw some stuff in the video also that I couldn't enumerate, but some of the things that we've heard sort of most often on safety concerns, people going the wrong way, one-way lanes, particularly delivery drivers on mopeds or motorized bikes and motorized vehicles using the lanes at all, just sort of a question that Sergeant brought up about in which cases that's really illegal. Often at high speeds, failure of cyclists to comply with stop signs and red lights for use of pedestrians, high speed bikes in pedestrian areas, pedestrian heavy areas downtown, including pedestrian zones, like I was talking about, cyclists on the sidewalk, in general travel lanes or on Boston Common paths, even with the presence of dedicated bike lanes around the Common. And the question sort of overall with that is, what are your thoughts for folks who state they support making Boston more bikeable, but who believe bike lanes as a solution to that are dangerous for pedestrians and should be removed?
So, I think, I guess at a high level, right, I think there's a clear need to build streets that encourage good behavior by all users of the street. The Sergeant used the phrase voluntary compliance, and ultimately most of what happens on our streets is not the result of a fine that's about to be handed out the moment you step out of line. It's about people recognizing that they're in a shared public space and they have a shared responsibility to the other people in that space. And so whether you are driving a car or riding a bike, recognizing that you are bigger and faster than a pedestrian and recognizing that you have a duty to yield, you have a duty to care for the people who are using the space adjacent to you, is and must be at the heart of a functioning transportation system. I think, when it comes to bike lanes, our approach is to create separated space, right? I think anybody who has walked down a sidewalk and had somebody zip by them at high speed on a bike can tell you that that is a very uncomfortable experience and sometimes a dangerous experience. And simultaneously, for those who ride bikes, and I count myself as one of those, riding a bike in a congested street where there are cars switching lanes, moving back and forth, where you're squeezed in between a parked car that might open its door and a car that's speeding down in a travel lane, that is also a very uncomfortable and very unsafe experience. And so we try to create designated space for people to ride bikes. We also invite people who, as the Sergeant alluded to, state law has not kept up to date with the realities of what's out there on our streets. But our position is that vehicles which are of a similar size and travel at a similar speed to bikes are welcome to use those lanes. So stand-up scooters, that the majority of which, if you buy, will be capped at somewhere between 15 and 20 miles an hour. They are very compatible with bike lanes and are much more compatible with being in the bike lane than on the sidewalk. Motorized mopeds and motorcycles do not belong in bike lanes. They typically go faster and can be much more disruptive to people who are trying to ride bikes safely. Ultimately, when we look at the data around bike lanes and the safety implications of adding bike lanes, it is unequivocal that adding bike lanes makes it safer for people on bike and, in general, safer for people who walk. There's been a tremendous amount of research looking at pedestrian injuries and crashes as it relates to the addition of bike lanes. And almost to a T, what that data shows is that because bike lanes tend to constrict the road somewhat, they slow down cars, they shorten crossing distances in many cases for pedestrians, that they do reduce injuries to pedestrians on those streets. as well as making riding much safer for cyclists. So I think, we are, fundamentally, we do have a goal about building a connected, safe bike network throughout the city, but we are grounded in engineering best practice and research that shows the value of these designs. These are not things we make up from whole cloth. There are standards and templates from MassDOT, from USDOT, from the National Association of City Transportation Officials that guide the design of these facilities and that help ensure that they're designed in a way to maximize safety for everyone. So that's really the principle that we approach when we do this work.
So, again, bike lanes are very controversial. I've seen more rooms full from bike lane conversations than I've seen from, say, violent crime conversations, right? And
It's that.
it is sad. Yeah, it is sad. Some of the most horrific injuries I've seen as a police officer, been a cop for almost 10 years, are motor vehicle versus pedestrian. There is no crumple zone on a pedestrian. Texting while driving, distracted driving, looking for the phone charger you dropped, or spilling your coffee, or shaving while driving, which I've seen, which is out of control. All things that are very, very dangerous to pedestrians, to people on bicycles, to people walking. Bike lanes, I'm 50-50 on personally. For all the reasons, it makes the drive sometimes longer, it condenses down 3 lanes into 2 or into 1, depending on how the lane's associated, but we see less injuries. So if it means the travel is a little longer, if I have to see less people get injured or run over, or those ghost bicycles, right, the bicycle we paint white and put up against the post when someone gets killed, usually against a car or a truck, something like that, I'm okay with it as long as, like the chief said, it's done in a way that kind of suits everybody's needs. So bicyclists have a right to be in the street just like a car. If they're going to act like a car, they need to behave like a car. Which means when we see them just flying through on Tremont Street past, I think that was Avery, right, coming right through the red light, that is a citable offense, all right? The ticket gets written out, if anyone here has ever received a warning, of course, right? If you ever receive a warning or a ticket, it says, all your information on the top. The only thing we ignore is we don't put a plate number, we don't put a vehicle description, we just write bicycle. But there is failure to stop at a red light for a bicycle, right? It's in the motor vehicle chapter section, right? It's 90-1 or it's chapter 85. And the fees aren't $100, it's like $20 for every bicycle offense. The issue is, we have to be able to stop that person. Same with the dirt bikes, same with the mopeds. We don't chase for severe motor vehicle infraction. Most people know that we're not going to chase you. Unless you just committed a heinous violent crime, we are not going to put everyone else at risk to chase you. Whether it be bicycle or motorcycle or scooter or another car. I think that makes a lot of sense, right? If I'm trying to stop somebody for a red light and they speed up to 80 miles an hour to avoid getting a red light ticket, that means there's 2 people now doing 80 miles an hour, right? The person trying to get away and now the police officer, and it puts so many other people at risk. We just don't do it. There has to be something very violent to occur, or just occurred, for us to pursue that. So that's one of the things where you see that something just goes and we can't catch up to it. If traffic's so congested, we're not going to jump on sidewalks and try to blow past a bunch of people to stop somebody from a red light ticket on a bicycle. If they're going to act like pedestrians, then again, they belong in the bike lanes. If they're going to act like vehicles, then they can be in the road. So that's one thing that has to be the shared space. Pedestrian zone is another space that I ride the police bicycle occasionally as well, when time allows. The pedestrian zone has always been a little strange because it's for pedestrians or the 18-wheeler delivering a load, right? And I always laughed at that, right? So, the Uber driver or the taxi driver who's looking at their phone, they're looking to look for the person, and they're still pulling forward, but they're not actually looking because they're looking for who's hailing them down. We allow some of our biggest trucks, like the Brinks armored truck picking up the money delivery for any of our businesses down there, right? We allow some of our biggest vehicles because they're commercial and it's allowed space. So to hear that there's a kind of an upcoming thought on the pedestrian safety zone is really good to hear. Yeah, we'll leave it at that for this question.
Yeah, thank you. So we're going to dig in a little bit more on pedestrian safety, and Michael actually anticipated a question about areaways, and so I'll kind of dig into that a little bit. I Broadly, just wanted to sort of re-highlight what some of the panelists have already said, that obviously downtown is very pedestrian-heavy, variety of uses. It's certainly true for what we think of as sort of the downtown neighborhood, but also really the neighborhoods around us as well, whether it's from Chinatown, Four Point as well, and some folks from the Wharf District as well, are all areas that there's lots of residents, tourists, workers, lots of people walking around, and that is both sort of the strength and challenge in a way of the areas you identified. The downtown bid did actually note that back in August, we had the highest foot traffic count that we had since back in March 2020. So we're sort of seeing that continual upward trend returning, despite what the media may sort of say about downtown being quiet or empty. I think folks who are here every day know that that is not really the case. And given all of that, we then have all these sort of poorly managed and maintained sidewalks. Typically, we often hear it's because of areaways, as Michael alluded to. In fact, we heard that from Mayor Wu at the State of Downtown, our event a few weeks ago when we were talking specifically about sidewalk maintenance. People have also, as you folks have noted, highlighted that crosswalks are often impeded. And I think a question that maybe is particularly for Council President Flynn, and Michael to follow up on again. For every question, Chief, you're welcome to weigh in on this. Given sort of all that usage, how is the city, BTD, the downtown bid, as you were talking about, Michael, when we were kind of all about that, kind of working together to keep up sidewalk maintenance, crosswalk maintenance, and pedestrian zone, and also to keep crosswalks clear, particularly again, because we do have this sort of weird dual usage of pedestrians and 18-wheelers. And how is the city working to address sidewalk maintenance on top of areaways in particular?
Thank you for the question. And one of the main priorities a city council has is voting on the budget. And before I vote on the budget, even before the mayor submits her budget to the city council, I reach out to the bid, I reach out to the neighborhood association, and we probably do 2 or 3 walks in the neighborhood a year, and that's what we specifically look at, is what's working, what's not working, looking at the sidewalk, looking at the crosswalk, looking at the ramp, looking at the street, looking at the infrastructure, to see what is needed as I advocate for the neighborhood during the budget process. Sometimes I'm successful, a lot of times I'm not, unfortunately. But I still see a lot of challenges we face in this neighborhood. We need to invest more money into this neighborhood on infrastructure, improving the quality of life, improving the public safety, but dealing with these crosswalks, dealing with these sidewalks, making sure that they're safe for everybody. And we can debate these big issues, and that's fine. But if we can't solve the small issues, the quality of life issues, the neighborhood services, that's the bread and butter of a city, is dealing with those quality of life issues. And it's critical that we spend more time, we spend more money and resources dealing with issues that impact pedestrian safety. And that means fixing our sidewalks, fixing our streets. We do have some crosswalks that need more painting. All of those issues, I actually keep a running track of every issue, every complaint I receive, and I make a log of it, and I inform the chief of streets, I inform public works, transportation. But that's what I focus on as your city councilor, making sure that those issues are addressed. And we need to do a better job on it. We have excellent city workers. They do a tremendous job. But we need to support them as well to make sure that they have the resources, the tools to do that job. And I really need the cooperation too of residents to focus on those quality of life issues, neighborhood concerns, because that's critical. If we can't solve them, we can't solve the big issues in city government. And one final point I'll make, I didn't want to weigh in too much on the bike lane related issue, but I'm not sure if anyone here is from the Wharf District Council. But anyway, what I want to see when we have this debate about bikes in the neighborhood, there has to be a neighborhood process. Residents have to be heard. They know about the neighborhood better than I do, better than city officials. And sometimes I think your voices are not heard during this debate. We have people that make decisions for you, and it's unfair. What I want to do is get us back to listening to residents, listening to your concerns, focusing on the issues that are important to you, not the issues that are important to me, but what's important to you. And that's about keeping residents safe, so you can take a walk throughout your neighborhood at nighttime with your family, or as a senior when you're crossing the crosswalk, knowing someone's going to stop and let you by, or little kids. I do not have the same feeling that many of my colleagues do, that this is going very well. I just don't have that same feeling. I think we have a lot of challenges, concerns, and I'm not as confident as other people are. I'll be honest with you. We're not focused like we should be on these quality of life issues, neighborhood services, and we need to refocus our energy, time, effort to ensure that pedestrians are safe. And I do not believe they are safe. When someone's going 40 miles an hour up Washington Street or down Tremont Street, and there's a senior walking in the crosswalk, that person is not going to stop. I was troubled when I heard about the bicyclist that hit the stroller. I'd like to learn more about that and what happened to the child. But I think you need to hold your elected officials accountable. We had a big meeting, a couple weeks ago on Tremont Street with the Neighborhood Association. All the elected officials were there. But we need to hold them accountable as well to ensure that you get your fair share of basic city services, neighborhood services. And that's what I'm going to continue doing. And I would like to challenge my colleagues in government too to visit this neighborhood more often, because I don't see them often in this neighborhood. I don't see them at meetings, listening to residents. I see them once a year coming to a meeting. That's not how you solve problems. You solve problems by listening to residents, engaging them, talking about what's important to them. So I want us to get back to the basic city services, neighborhood services, quality of life. Thank you.
Mr. Flynn,
Are there any questions asked of us this evening?
We will, so after this session, this portion of the session is over, we'll have Q&A for the audience as well.
We've got a lot to say.
And can I just say one final point, is the students, Emerson students and Suffolk students are also part of the neighborhood, and I want to make sure that their voices are heard as well, their quality of life, making sure this neighborhood is safe for everybody. So I just want to acknowledge the important work of Suffolk University and Emerson College as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor.
Yeah, so just to speak to some of the questions about crosswalks and crosswalk maintenance and in general what we're doing around pedestrian accommodations. So areaways, as Mike said, is a challenge for us. If you've ever seen a sidewalk, a typical sidewalk be reconstructed, some guys come out with jackhammers, tear up the old sidewalk, they put down some forms, they pour some new concrete, they level it out, and the job is done. If you've ever watched an areaway get reconstructed, and it doesn't happen as often as it should, there's one that's finishing up down in Liberty Square right now that I've been kind of lunchtime going out and checking the progress on. They have to hand excavate the building structure that sits below the sidewalk. They repair it, they patch it, they waterproof it. It's a very delicate job because in many cases the structures have storage space or mechanical space. In some cases we've had instances of illegal living space, and then a sidewalk is very carefully recreated on top of it. This obviously for the city, it's something that landlords can do and building owners can do. When the city needs to do it, it means that we have a much more complex process because it requires us to work very closely with the property owner and our inspectional services department to get inside the areaway to ensure that it's structurally sound, and then to do this very careful and painstaking work. And as a result, it doesn't happen very often, but the result of that is that we have some really terrible sidewalks downtown. So we have a task force that is building a playbook on all of the steps that need to happen to make sure every department that needs to be involved is aligned. We're working with our law department to make sure that we have all the documents in place to get access to buildings when we need to get in order to do inspections. And the goal of this is to make it, although it will always be a more complex process, a more regularized process. And instead of, historically the city's kind of thrown up their hands and said landlords have to deal with it. We know we need to be able to deal with it, but we need to build this toolkit to do it. Crosswalks generally, we are doing a lot more crosswalk striping than we have in years past. This summer we did a focused effort on every school zone in the city of Boston, and we restriped every single school zone crosswalk throughout the city, recognizing the critical importance of kids getting safely to school. We also actually about a month ago launched and this will probably, if any of you work in technology or business, this will probably make you groan, but for the first time, we now have a digital asset management system for the city's street infrastructure. This has been a project we've been working on over the last year to get an inventory of all of our crosswalks. We appreciate all of you reporting issues on 311 and the counselors gathering issues. The reality is, if that's how we are fixing things that are broken, then we're not doing our job as well as we could be. The goal is to know, when did we last restripe the crosswalk? How likely is it that it is faded? When we go out and do inspections, we have a place to note it, and we automatically can generate a work order that can then result in improvements. So it will take time to catch up. We have a lot of deferred maintenance, but we're trying to build the systems and processes in place so that we can do it efficiently. The last thing I'll just say, the issue of crosswalks being blocked got brought up. There is a significant enforcement component to this. This is something that is a shared responsibility between the Boston Transportation Department, which I oversee, and the Boston Police Department. But it's something that we're trying to build our workforce on the transportation side with our parking enforcement officers. We just brought on our first new class of parking enforcement officers in 3 years. They were sworn in last week. The pandemic it created a lot of internal challenges with our workforce and the labor force, and we've been digging out of that, but we're hoping to swear in our next class before the end of the year. We will keep doing that until we are back at full strength in our parking enforcement. The last thing I will say about blocked crosswalks is that 18-wheelers have no business making deliveries to small retail stores in a congested downtown area. This is a tremendous problem, and it is a result of companies who have chosen to save on labor by putting larger and larger vehicles on our city streets. It is not uncommon to see what in the transportation parlance is known as a WB67. This is the maximum legal size semi-trailer that can operate on any street in the United States. They're typically about 75 feet long with the trailer. We see WB67s unloading 1 pallet of goods to take into a Dunkin' Donuts. That is ridiculous. Unfortunately, it is legal. And so this is an area that we need to work with where we can with the companies, but I think more importantly, this is an area of potential legislative action at the city or the state level to give us some tools to restrict what types of vehicles can be used in our most congested and pedestrian-focused spaces. If you look elsewhere outside of this country in particular, but in a few places in this country and Europe, in many of their downtown pedestrian zones, large trucks, anything that's sort of larger than a small box truck is banned. And that is how they maintain the quality of the experience. That's how they ensure that there isn't a truck. I feel bad for the drivers. They're trying to find a place to go, but that truck just should not be there in the first place. And I think there's work we can do to help limit that.
I want to follow up on the last comments. Councilor Flynn, I know you and I have talked extensively about some of the challenges, and they are at odds with, I think, some of the vision that the city has, aspirational vision around making the city more bikeable and doing things that are more future facing. I think one of the challenges that we hear over and over from residents is, look, I don't have a choice but to drive to my job on the South Shore, for example, and I can't take the T because it doesn't work or it doesn't go where I need it to, and therefore I have to. I think the Globe, for folks who read the Globe, there was a great piece about 7 to 10 days ago about the real cost of the MBTA not functioning on the lives of folks who rely on the T. I think the same can be said about folks who rely on driving to and from work. Getting back to the neighborhood, if you've young kids, you're missing dinners, you're missing school activities, you're missing a whole variety of things because you can't get home on time. And it's getting worse and worse in terms of congestion and some of the issues that are, just they're real, right? And I think it's not folks complaining for the sake of complaining, it's just the practical reality is you step outside at 6 o'clock or at 9 a.m. in the morning on the streets of downtown, there's going to be a lot of congestion and it just takes a lot longer to get around. If you live on Tremont, it used to be a lot easier to get onto Storrow because you have the right turn onto Boylston. That's not there anymore. And so now we're idling, we're creating more pollution, is my assumption, and it's taking a lot longer for folks to get to where they need to get. And again, I think everyone in this room, speaking on behalf of residents, because we've talked about this, we're supportive of bikes and other modalities to get folks from point A to point B. The practical reality, though, is that we don't have a functional public transportation alternative that allows us to say, let's put the cars away and take the bus or take the T. During COVID, we noted at the beginning, we had a number of changes that were made to the city. This predates your involvement in that specific thing, Jascha, but I think you're plugged into it, obviously. We've had, I'd say, productive conversations with transportation planners, many who have been with the city for multiple decades. Chris Osgood, who used to wear a similar hat, who's still with the city, has done a lot of work on behalf of the city, particularly around streets and block by block thinking and planning. Mayor Walsh, when he was in office, we held a Zoom during COVID because we couldn't do this, obviously, and the conversation was, we're going to make a number of changes that were pilots to the downtown corridor around bus and bike lanes with the expectation, the solid expectation that we would revisit with real data when the world reopened, whether or not it's working or not, right? The experiment of putting bus and bike lanes down. So put that aside as Exhibit A. Exhibit B, when we think about the various advisory groups, whether it's planned downtown or individual project by project approvals that go on through the city, many of us in this room, Matthew, myself in particular, George as well, Mary and Peggy, we served on a number of advisory groups, and oftentimes if there's a 75 slide deck, there might be half of the page that's devoted to traffic, quality of life, policing, the real impacts that really make neighborhoods hum. As a Plan Downtown advisory group member, we spend minimal to no time thinking about the traffic impacts, the need for additional policing, how do you actually put in place more lighting and more infrastructure to accommodate these lofty goals. And the majority of that plan is going to do big things for the neighborhood, but I think if you peel back some of the layers, a lot of residents wonder, how does this actually work in practice? Who's looking at the big picture? And what confidence should we have that our streets will be modified and rethought, that we're going to have real data that informs whether or not we should have a bike lane here or a bus lane there? How does it all connect? So that's Exhibit B. When I think about the advisory groups that I've sat on in the last 7 or 10 years across administrations, it's not an administration thing, it's just practical. We don't spend much time thinking about, or I haven't been a part of conversations where we've been really thoughtful about what the total impact of a project. There's a hotel that's being proposed on West Street. A lot of the opposition was it's going to create more traffic. The better question, I think, is what if you take a bus lane out of the neighborhood and you open up more space? Does that fundamentally change how that project's going to be reviewed and thought about, or are we stuck in an old mentality? And so this idea of thinking about traffic and putting in place bus lanes and bike lanes kind of piecemeal is what it feels like. How do we graduate from the spot placement of these sorts of things to something more systemic, or at least it doesn't feel like it is systemic yet, thoughtful systemic planning around buses and bikes, other modalities, so that all these projects get reviewed with that lens. And to Councilor Flynn's point, we think about the real impacts at the ground floor level as a resident in this neighborhood or a small business. How should we have confidence that the plans that are being put in place, the projects that are being proposed, whether it's a skyscraper or a new business or a restaurant or a hotel, that we're truly considering all of the impacts that these projects are going to have, and that the stuff that we've done during COVID will truly be looked at from a data-driven lens, which Jascha knows is your background. So maybe speak to the data that you're using to inform bus lanes and bike lanes, speak to the bus lanes and bike lanes that exist today. You can use Washington Street as an example in Tremont. What's the data telling us? Are they being utilized, are they not? And how is the city, I guess it's you, but who in the city is looking at the total impact versus the spot impacts that we've talked about? So there's a lot to.
That's a very good question.
Love your thoughts.
I'll do my best to try to respond to that. So the way that we do sort of large scale, we do transportation planning at different scales. So when there's a development project that's being reviewed, there's a typical methodology that's used that looks at trip generation and the performance of intersections and the different types of modes that people are likely to use to get to and from a project, and then applies that against the existing network and gives you what is a model of what might happen. But those models are very imprecise, and those models are often wrong. As with most models that you do, they can sometimes be directionally informative, but they rarely see the future, because any change you make, especially in something as complex as a transportation system, often produces changes that a model can't foresee in terms of behavior or the time that people choose to take a certain trip based on the congestion that they expect to experience or the parking that they expect to be available or not. So, this happens at both the individual project level. At the citywide level, we have Go Boston 2030, which is our citywide transportation plan that was completed in 2017. And this does work to map out a big picture for how we want the transportation system to function, the ways that we can make it safer, the ways that we can improve the functioning of our transit system, recognizing that that sometimes seems like a losing battle, but we know that there are things that the city can do when it comes to helping the bus to run more effectively and supporting the T in the very important, the critical work that they have ahead of them to restore the basic functioning of the system. It also lays out goals for what it would take to create a bike network that allows people to get to and from their destinations safely on a bike. And I think the network piece of this is important because downtown is one of the places that is a crucial nexus in that bike network. If you talk to people who bike about their experiences, if you talk to people who don't bike about why they choose not to, safety ends up being the #1 thing that you hear about. And the issue is that if you have a bike lane on one block, but it does not connect to the next block, or there's a big gap in between there and the next destination, what you end up doing is discouraging people from using the bike network, from biking at all, because that experience they have in that terrible intersection where they almost got run over by a semi-trailer is the one that they remember and the one that often keeps them from riding. When we build connected, protected bike facilities, as we've started to do in the area around the common, the public garden, parts of the back bay, we see an increase typically in ridership in those places. And so just since you brought up the Tremont Street question, I brought some stats from, we did traffic counts. These are automated counts. They use a little camera that determines what types of vehicles are moving on the road. On October 1st of 2019, on Tremont Street at Boylston, and then we do these counts with some regularity. The most recent one was from September 20th of this year, so just a few weeks ago. What we saw is that in 2019, bikes accounted for, before the bike lane was put in place, accounted for about 5.5% of the vehicles traveling along that stretch of Tremont. This year, and these are days with very similar weather, so similar time of year, similar weather, this year it was just shy of 11% of the vehicles. So that's about a doubling of the percentage of vehicles with the addition of that bike lane. And we see similar patterns in most of the places where we've added protected bike facilities. I know I saw a question and got some emails from some folks about the Washington Street condition, and so just to give you our most recent counts from Washington and Hayward and Avery, basically same spot. We have, so there are about 3,700 cars that travel along that stretch of Washington Street in a typical day. There are about 700 bicycles in the warmer months and about 500 in the winter months every day. Bikes on that stretch of Washington Street there account for about 20% of the total vehicles throughout the day, and during the morning peak, it's more than a third of the vehicles are bikes. And the bus, which travels the Silver Line, the SL4, and the SL5, which use some of the bus lanes along Washington Street, those bus lanes serve about 10,000 people a day. So These are the things that we're looking at when we're measuring, okay, who is being impacted by a project? If we reduce the width of the street, if we add some delay, does it benefit from a safety perspective? Are we seeing increase in ridership for bikes? Are we seeing benefits to the performance of the bus in terms of on-time performance? These are the kinds of analyses that we typically do. As I may have mentioned, I kind of got myself a little bit off track, but we are updating the Go Boston 2030 transportation plan, and so we'll be refreshing with the most recent data that we have about the performance of the transportation network. We will also be incorporating the MBTA's bus network redesign, which is their first in, I think, about 100 years, total revamp of the MBTA bus network. And incorporating that as we think about the placement of bus lanes and where we need transit priority corridors. Some of that has actually already started to happen as we've prioritized certain bus lane projects that we know will serve what will become very high frequency routes and critical connections within the MBTA. So these are some of the ways that we are trying to use data and trying to take this big picture. But I think it's just important to recognize that, if anybody comes to you and tells you that they know exactly what will happen in 20 years if you do these 5 things, they are wrong, right? This is the humility that everyone in transportation needs to practice if they don't. It's that, we make our best guess based on historical practice, based on models. We have data about what types of changes tend to produce what types of outcomes, but it is a complex and dynamic system, and ultimately, a lot of what we need is care, but also agility to adapt as things change and as we see things develop.
Thanks, Jascha. We're going to pivot to audience Q&A in just a moment here. 2 quick rapid-fire questions that should take 30 seconds. So the idea of removing the bus lane from Washington to have it not turn down the Ladders Silver Line, is that something the city is supportive of or is thinking about?
So the MBTA is thinking about removing the SL5 link onto Temple Place in that terrible turn. So we're not looking at it from the perspective of the bus lane as the driver, we're looking at it from the perspective of the bus route. And the MBTA, I think, recognizes the challenges of that route, and so they are looking to take the SL5 to follow the SL4 down Essex Street. If that were to happen, we would likely remove the bus lane past Essex, but leave it between, from Washington going all the way up to Essex Street.
Perfect. And just for avoidance of doubt, folks always ask us this, you do talk to the MBTA, your counterparts, and you are coordinated.
We have a transit team that is now 8 people strong. We just added 2 more members to that team, and they spend every single day talking with their counterparts at the MBTA and trying to make sure our city streets and our signals work for the bus.
Perfect. One other one that's not controversial, but just a reality. So here in downtown Boston, it's one of the few neighborhoods in the city that doesn't have resident permanent parking. And so when we think about, folks, no matter the kind of home you live in, or you're a student, or you're full-time or part-time, you're typically shelling out $300-400 per month to house your car in a garage in downtown. What do you say to residents who think there should be a universal permit for folks who live in areas of the city that don't have dedicated resident permanent parking? Should there be some sort of a pass, or if you go to City Hall, you don't just say, no, you don't live somewhere you can get a pass, or should it be a tax abatement for folks who have to shell out additional money to park in a garage?
I may ask the council president to speak to how this resident is in a situation that doesn't deal with the universal pass.
I think residents should have residential parking. I know there's not much parking here, obviously, but I think there should be a sticker for residents to park, identified parking spaces, maybe even including some of the garages where the city can partner with the garage where we can have residents park there, maybe even such as the Boston Common garage. I know it's a little further away, but I'm open to that. I would support that. Again, you pay high property taxes. I want to make sure that you get your fair share of basic city services, neighborhood services, and it's about respect. And this is a neighborhood just like any other neighborhood. And you deserve the same level of quality of life, the same level of neighborhood services, and that's not a lot to ask for. So,
How do we do it?
this gentleman here at the end of the table, let's get it done.
Well, so let me say this, right? I think the idea of a universal pass is probably a non-starter in every other neighborhood that abuts downtown. If you go to Beacon Hill, if you go to Chinatown, if you go to the Leather District or Bay Village or the North End, people are fiercely protective of their on-street parking. And I think we would find, Council President would find that any attempt to create that universal pass would meet with a whole lot of opposition. Fundamentally, right, I agree with the Council President that, every neighborhood deserves services, but downtown is not like every other neighborhood in many respects. Downtown has a very different density, it has a very different mix of demands, it has a very small number of streets, if any, that are primarily residential streets. Even the Back Bay has a residential district and a business district, and in the residential district, we have a lot of resident-only parking, and we have almost none of it in the business district. So I think in order to create any kind of resident parking permit program in downtown, we would need to look at where the city has land and parking spaces that are not there primarily to serve businesses or that could serve double duty, and look at whether there is sufficient space to create a program that would be meaningfully beneficial to residents. I think it's certainly a conversation that we're open to having, but this is a unique neighborhood or cluster of neighborhoods, and one that I think requires a very careful and thoughtful approach to recognizing the diversity of needs and demands that are on the space.
As the District 2 City Councilor, I represent a good portion of the downtown area, including the Wharf District, Bay Village, and they may not be traditional types of neighborhoods, such as, Dorchester or East Boston. But what I've tried to do over the last 6 years is to stress to city employees, to city departments, that we need to treat you like a traditional neighborhood where basic city services are delivered effectively. Because if we get away from the notion that you're not a traditional neighborhood, then that's almost a way out for city departments to overlook you. And that's not my job. My job is to make sure city departments address your concerns, address your issues. So, I have a different role than other people do. And my role is to advocate for you, in advocating for you with city departments. And that's something, obviously, I take very seriously. So, we may disagree, we may respectfully disagree, but we both have different jobs. And my job is to represent you, the residents of this neighborhood.
I would just say, I don't think we disagree on the need for services here, but I think we have a fundamental spatial reality that we have to contend with in every single neighborhood in which we deliver any kind of parking or on-street service. And so, to get to a place where we could have a functional and valuable resident parking program would take some work. It would take some investigation as to what streets are appropriate for that, and we'd be happy to consider that conversation with folks.
Thank you both, and I think, as a resident, I think for many of us who've got a car here or are trying to figure this out, whether it's in the form of a tax abatement or it's actual dedicated use of land for parking, it'd be helpful, I think, we hear from residents and we start the conversation to explore it, and figure out what's viable, what's not. So we're going to move to audience Q&A here. Thank you for your patience. I'll walk around with the mic. If you have a question, raise your hand. I'll come around and I'll try to find you, and we'll make our way. If you can direct your question, a specific question to one of our panelists, just direct it accordingly, and we'll try to get through them all. All right. All right, questions?
Thank you all for coming this evening. It was informative and a little bit frustrating, part of it, but thank you so much. And my question, or it's a comment, is the answer I got for the danger of maneuvering around downtown Boston is it's voluntary compliance. And if that's the only solution, we have to the danger. It's really dangerous for me walking in downtown Boston. And if voluntary compliance is the only solution, we're in trouble, because I tell you, the people that run into me are not thinking about their compliance at all. They don't know the rules. I'm sure they have not read that piece of paper you have. And I know the bike shops are supposed to be giving the different vehicles the speed limits on Boston. Whether they do or not, I don't know. Voluntary compliance is not working. So I don't have a solution, but I do have a request for give us some hope down here. Thank you.
I'll start. So voluntary compliance, while being the biggest, right, that is the goal of civil motor vehicle infraction. So when legislators say we want to create safety around motor vehicles, we put some restrictions in, right, speed limits and various, how we behave as the motoring public. That's the goal, right? The police officers, right, so we said we get 3,700 cars roughly on Wash Essex come by every single day. I don't have enough police officers, and that's a cop-out, but I don't have enough police officers to put there every single day and monitor traffic in that one specific spot. Now, resource allocation, as the police department, we look to say, okay, we need to respond to 911 calls. We need to handle quality of life crimes, as the city councilor said, right? Quality of life. This area has other issues, including we have a homeless and drug addicted population issue that we're working to get these people services. And on top of all that, need to make sure that our pedestrian public is safe. So to say it's the only option, it's not, right? We've done motor vehicle citations in the last several months. Let's do parking tickets, quite a few. We'll even do targeted enforcement. We'll say one officer or two officers or a group of officers, only assignment for that shift will be just to go out and just issue, whether it be motor vehicle infractions, warnings, however they choose to use their discretion to get the message to the public, you can't drive like that. But it's very resource intensive. If the North End, for example, has basically, as a neighborhood, said we really don't care about double parking on Hanover Street, right? As a whole, right? It's still illegal. You still give out citations for it, but it's not uncommon to drive down Hanover Street and see a car double park with its flashers on. The person jumps out, runs in the store, does their business, runs back. If they get a ticket while they were gone, that's the price of doing business on the North End. If society there neighbors there have said to us, right, by virtue of their actions, we're not super concerned about the double parking on Hanover Street. It drives me, as a police officer, absolutely nuts, right? It causes hoarding traffic all the way down. So if we're saying in downtown, on Tremont Street, Washington Street, and all of our side streets, the feeder streets, that we're much more concerned about pedestrian safety and some of the access and some of the risk, we can absolutely up our efforts there. It's just where we allocate those resources. Right? It just means I'll have to pull officers because I don't have an infinite amount. As the council president said, we struggle to hire. In 2 weeks, I'm happy to say we have 170-something, 160-something graduating. We should get maybe 2 dozen or so down here. So we'll have a bunch of new officers that are going to come down here and help patrol this neighborhood, right, and help with our staffing crisis. We have a limited number of officers that can go out and do everything.
I would just follow up on that. There's other things you can do, like speed bumps in the bike lanes. A speed bump, or have a gate like a railroad crossing come down, or have a robot, ask AI, do something. I know do what I want you to do. Here's a job that we do. Most people. But there must be some way that you can make bicycles behave. And I don't know. I don't know. How else?
So I will say, I do not have a solution, a 100% solution for you on the question of bicycles who are not yielding to pedestrians. Most of our efforts are focused on cars because cars are what kill. And when we look at the options that we have, recognizing the limited and the way that the police resources are stretched thin, there is a solution here, but it is going to take some advocacy by people in this room. So there are dozens of states in the United States that have automated enforcement for speed cameras and red lights. And we desperately need it in Massachusetts. It is something that the state legislature has failed to act on for multiple sessions. I had the occasion of being in New York for the first time in a few years earlier this summer. And in that period, they have rolled out a substantial red light program in Manhattan and other parts of the city. And it was shocking to me, having been away from New York for so long, having spent so much time watching how people drive at intersections in Boston. That experience you have here where every single red light, 1, 2, 3 cars go through after the light has changed, it no longer happens in Manhattan or with any frequency, right? And that is because they have put in place this robust automated enforcement program. So when we look at the options, the opportunities here, we are ready. That is an RFP that I will have out the door the day the state legislature passes a bill to put in place some kind of automated enforcement, but we need advocacy because we just cannot do it under the current law.
As a brief follow-up to that, Council President Flynn, would that be something that the city could pass as a home rule position?
That's something the city could do, if it was passed at the state level. I do know the city has tried to do that in the past. I know there is support in the city for it, especially throughout the neighborhoods of Boston. Residents really want to see that. We see it in how effective it is in Providence, Rhode Island as well, Washington D.C. and as the chief mentioned in New York City. But that's something, if it was a home rule, it would have to go before the city council, passed by the city council, then up to the mayor for her signature, and then to the state legislature, to the governor's office. But that's something I definitely would support. I think it's a great recommendation.
Thank you very much. It's been very interesting. I think there are more problems than I thought there were. Bicycles do harm people very much. I have a friend that was a hit and run on a bike on the sidewalk. The bike was going the wrong way. She ended up in a coma. Thank God she's okay, but things have to change. I have a solution. And I'm either going to get lots of yays and lots of boos. Oh, I could use some boo. When I wanted a driver's license, I had to study a book. There should be a book of rules that we and the bicycle drivers can have. Are they allowed to drive on the sidewalk? We don't know. I don't know. Are they allowed to go the wrong way? I don't know. Are they allowed to go through red lights? I don't know. And speaking of licenses, I think that bicyclists should get a license. They are driving like maniacs. They don't care. They feel superior to us. I think they should get a license. I think they should get insurance. And I think that they should have a license plate with a number on the back of their bike. I was on a corner, there was a policeman right next to me, and a bicyclist went right through the red light. And I said, thank goodness you mentioned that. He said, well, he was on foot. He said, I couldn't catch him. Well, maybe if he was able to get his license number, something could have been done. And I think that a lot of us are afraid to not stop at red lights or do something that's incorrect because we don't want anything to happen to our insurance. And I think it's important that if they want to be on our streets and wherever they are, they need to be licensed.
The only thing I would say is about licensing. We run a kids program, right? So the A1 Community Service Office runs a kids bicycle program. We give up kids helmets for the elementary school kids. So that was something that would have to be done at the legislative level. I assume the state level, if we're going to talk about getting license plates.
Well, how about if we say
bicycles.
12 or over? It doesn't have to be for a 4-year-old who is not driving downtown.
And those are for excuses.
Correct.
Actually, there's a women's, the city runs a women's bike group. So I'm a female. I ride from Chinatown to my chiropractor and my hair appointment in Back Bay because I'm not going to spend 30 minutes of my day try to find a parking space in Back Bay, and I almost got ran off the road by a driver the other day while I was in the bike lane, and I got verbally assaulted by somebody driving.
No, I'm not.
So I'm just
I
saying
agree
that,
with
like, as a female, it's very scary to ride a bike
Sure.
here, and I do follow the roads and the rules, and there are programs, so you just have to look them up.
But are they like?
You're not gonna change anything, the programs. This town has gone wild.
If you go to these programs and look for these, then you learn
Oh, come
the
on.
rules. Can you be respectful of other people's opinions? You keep
I've been here to
swearing
say
and
something for a
yelling.
long time.
Sorry, you should be respectful during most situations.
I am just giving my point of view as a small business owner in downtown, a female riding a bike. I have a car. I pay $325 a month to park my car so I can do car-like things. I also find that it's just not appropriate for me to drive Back Bay for my hair appointment or whatever. I find it easier to bike, and I think people should be respectful, and you get to choose whatever you want to do. But
Why
you shouldn't
can't-
be
What does a
rude.
woman have to do with that?
Yes, this has nothing, may I?
But you keep yelling at me, okay?
No, no, I'm not
So
yelling.
I'm going to encourage that we direct questions to the
No, no,
panelists and not to each other.
I would like to just finish. I respect you if you're doing the right thing, and it sounds like you are. But if you were trying to cross the street and another bike knocked you over, why can't they be licensed so we know who they are, where they live, what the history of their bike accidents have been, just like they do with cars? They should be insured. And every time they hit somebody and they get insured, their price will go up.
Just one of the panelists want to respond to that.
If the legislature puts forward that, then the police, as the law enforcement end, will enforce it.
Well, the legislature's having trouble making decisions constantly. I'm in the old section. This is the elderly people. I don't know if I'm gonna be here then.
It sounds like we need to advocate. If you alluded to this, Councilor Flynn, you always tell us to advocate. So one of our to-dos would be, we can figure out a series of things coming out tonight that require some advocacy, and we'll take out the pens and paper and start writing. But advocacy seems to be a theme that needs some attention.
Rishi, just a quick follow-up in response to that. We should also include electric scooters as well.
What about the vehicles that look like motorbikes with no license plates on them?
That's right.
Moped. Moped,
Yeah.
There are no rules.
Electric scooters, they go at excessive speed. It's very difficult for them to stop when they're going so fast, and they go right through red lights. And I'm very concerned that there's going to be a major accident soon. I also see the electric scooters. I don't know what you call them, just the one wheel. The person is balancing themselves. But if they were to hit someone or a pothole, that person could potentially die. Do we have a helmet rule as well for these types of vehicles? I don't know. But I guess my point is there has to be some type of rules and regulations. It can't be a free-for-all in the city. We have to know what the rules are, who abides by them, what the policy is, but people just can't decide on their own to do whatever they want because they feel like doing what they want. There has to be some rules, and that's the city's job, is to enforce the rules, to make the rules, and people abide by the rules. But you just can't have a free-for-all in the city of Boston. My opinion only.
Thank you, Councilor. A few more questions here. We're going to work our way back this way as well. Faith, question?
So somewhat related to this question, I just came back from Keel Island, lovely place to bike, okay? Every 10 feet, there was a small sign that said, "Stop," at the intersection. We don't have a single sign at any red light that says, "Bicyclist, stop." We don't have, and I don't think every street in Boston deserves to can be set up to have safe bike lanes. We have to make some decisions here and remove them where they're unsafe. Figure out a different way. There's also another sign, I see it down in Martha's Vineyard. Walk your bike. Walk your bike. I don't see one of those in the town of Boston. We have unsafe bike lanes, signage that is encouraging and complicit in bicyclists thinking they have the right of way to blow through a red light. I would ask you to have one more statistic if you're following the data. Show me the number of bicyclists that have stopped at a red light on Tremont Street. Correct. The number of bicyclists that have ever stopped on the corner of Avery Street in front of Washington. If it's more than one, I'd be amazed. And I'd also like to know, in your statistics that you're following, is it going the right way or the wrong way? Okay, because that's an important data point. It is a true safety risk. When you sit in this room and we tell you that a baby stroller has been crashed into, by the way, there wasn't a police person present, nor could a policeman have prevented the disaster. We were very fortunate that we didn't lose a child or worse. And I really think, in addition to the modality thinking, we want a process that demands action. It's simple. It's a very simple thing to just go back to the way we were. We had far less danger to the pedestrians. Now that we're back in COVID, please just simply remove those lanes, find a different way for bicyclists to be able to safely navigate this city, and don't imply to them that it's unsafe. And please, what are you doing about signage?
We are following the standard signage guidelines that apply to bike lanes and vehicle lanes that are part of the federal design standards for how these things are constructed. This is called the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices.
Where are the signs?
There's no standard sign for stopping on a bike lane because bicyclists in a bike lane are required to follow the same signage and rules that motor vehicles in the adjacent lane are required to
I'll tell you what I saw in Paris, France last year. A cyclist going through a red light. A police officer stopped there, they called for another police officer, they ticketed it and they took the bike. People don't run the lights. There are no rules in this town. It's disgraceful. I've lived at Tremont on the Common for 48 years. I own a vehicle, and I walk. And now I have guests from Canada, lots from Toronto, who are cyclists. They wear helmets, they stay in their lane, they stop at the lights. They never saw anything like what they've seen in this city here, ever. I have friends from France that cannot believe what's taking place in this city. There are no rules. And by the way, before I forget, because we're talking about that, when are they going to pave the streets in the city of Boston? They're falling apart, they're collapsing. You have to go 2 miles an hour up all of these streets so you don't destroy your vehicle. When are you going to pave the streets? When?
We pave every day.
You cannot pave. West. I could take you on a ride that would blow your mind in this city. I'm serious. I mean, West Street is the first example.
All right, sorry, I think our panelists are trying to reply, but you're not really giving them an opportunity. Understand your passion.
Okay, I live here.
I just wanted to pick up on one point that he made, which is about Paris, which I think is actually really interesting. Because in what we do at the BID, we consider ourselves urbanists, right? We study the best practices from all around the world. Paris, France, in particular, went from 125 miles of bike lanes 20 years ago to 625 miles today. They are going in that direction. There's probably no city in the world, I think, that's moving as aggressively forward on the development of bike lanes as a contribution to mode shift, to curing their environmental harms of their downtown. They are actually looking to remove the ability to drive through a 5.4 square mile area of the downtown of Paris, France in time for the Olympics next year. For environmental reasons, for quality of life reasons, for all the things that you all are, I think, talking about today. There are cities around the United States and around the world that are moving in this direction to the benefit of all of us. As Jascha started with at the beginning, bike lanes do calm roads. That doesn't mean that in every instance that everyone is safe each minute of the day. It is a shared street for all of us of every mode. My primary mode of transportation is a vehicle. It surely should be. I live in the Fenway. I should probably be riding the T to work or biking. My primary mode is vehicle. But I believe that the roads are for everyone, and I think the businesses that we represent downtown are very much communicating to us the fact that it is customers of every mode that are keeping them afloat as we try to get this neighborhood back where we were in 2019 and improve. So I think everyone should have the perspective that these streets are shared for all of us, and that if we were all a little kinder and more differential to each other, they would work a whole lot better than they do.
But the difference in
All right,
how they start.
we're gonna move on to some other questions. Thank you.
Oh my God, I have many questions.
I understand.
Many.
I'm a little reluctant to shift the conversation from safety for a moment, because safety really is important to all of us. But one thing that I have yet to hear in any conversation about transportation is really about families. Mayor Wu spoke to many people in this room just a few weeks ago, talking about bringing more families downtown. I have a family. I have yet to figure out any way of getting around the city other than walking. It's great for my pedometer, for my steps, but there is absolutely no way of moving about this city with an elementary school age child that is safe, other than walking, which is not necessarily so safe. So when we talk about mode shifts and biking, and I was just in Copenhagen, the best biking city in the world, and I've seen how it's done, but we are so far from getting to that place here. And so what are we doing to think more comprehensively about how we move families around? I mean, even when my daughter was younger and we needed a car seat, Ubers, Lyfts, cabs, I can't take her in that. You can't put a stroller on a crowded T. So I was walking mile upon mile and tiring myself out. Now, I don't know how to get her to school on a bike. We don't have places to store bikes. Blue bikes don't address, kids' needs. I'm seeing multifamily project or multi-generational, like residential projects coming up in Chinatown. Nobody's talking about how grandpa's getting his, grandchildren around. What are we doing to address this need for families to move out?
Yeah, it's a great point, and I have a 2.5 and 4.5-year-old, and so I can very much empathize with this challenge, right? It's more often than I would like, I end up putting them in the back of a car because that's the most available thing, and that's in some cases the only option that we have. I think, not to bring this conversation right back to safety, but I do think that is at the foundation of this question of how families move. The reason why you see so much in a place like Copenhagen, the reason why families ride bikes together is because it is safe to do so. And when you look at what, to use Paris as an example again, Paris has closed streets in front of schools to cars entirely so that families that are walking or biking or traveling there by transit have a safe way and know that they can, not have to hold tight on their kids' hands for every step until they're in that school door because they're in a space that is calm, that is safe, that is family friendly. We are trying to build more of those spaces. We are trying to take the spaces we have and the intersections we have and calm traffic. This can be something as small as little geometry changes so that cars making a turn have to do so more slowly. We're starting to add speed humps on the residential streets in Boston. This is not less of a benefit for downtown, but even in neighborhoods like Bay Village, we'll see speed humps on every residential street before long so that we can make sure that when people are walking in their neighborhoods that they feel safe, that they aren't having cars speed by them. This is a long-term project, and it's about making our infrastructure bringing our infrastructure to a level where you don't have to have that fear every time you go out with your family, where the choice of what mode you take isn't just dictated by that worry that your kid will become another statistic as a result of somebody's reckless driving. So this is part and parcel of the safety project. I think there are other things though that are happening. As the sergeant mentioned, the work that's being done to help kids build street smarts, whether that's on bike or on foot, so that they have a little bit more independence. We have a program called Safe Routes to Schools that's run out of the Boston Transportation Department that works with schools to help understand where students are coming from and look at the modes of transportation and the routes that people are taking and In some cases, that means physical changes to the infrastructure. In other cases, they have the walking school bus where groups of parents, a small group of parents will take the neighborhood kids and walk with them to the school. So we're trying to find more ways that we can bring this sort of safe family transportation into the norm in our neighborhoods and streets.
I think it's important to also know that, much like the chief here, a lot of the police officers that work down here, it's a very young, we call it a house, right? It's a very young station. A lot of us do have children, myself included, right? I'm 10-month-old and 2.5-year-old. So when we look at these things, right, and I want my child to be able to, the bike lane is what science and data says is the safest thing for them, and that's where I want them. If it's not, then I don't. So I agree, I think it needs more time. These are new, Boston's 400 years old almost, right? We were trying to convert something that used to be cow paths into major thoroughfares for buses and people and everyone to kind of make it work. So while we get frustrated too at times, I do want to thank the chief for their efforts and whatever's best for the kids. Please know that everybody up here is definitely looking in the best interest of children and families. We have children and families as well.
I'd like to respond very briefly. Walking to school, whether it's to Josiah Quincy School or to the Elliott School, is dangerous for families. And walking from here to the north end, but can you imagine driving a vehicle 25 miles an hour down one of these small streets? We need to, in my opinion, we need to reduce the speed limit, but we also have to redouble our efforts on enforcement of the current speeding miles per hour. The Boston Police, in my opinion, are doing an excellent job. We just don't have enough of them. And that's the critical role they could play on pedestrian safety, is enforcing the current speeding laws. Because driving 25 miles an hour on a Boston street is excessive. It needs to be, in my opinion, it needs to be 15 miles an hour or 20 miles an hour. You can't put your brakes on your car if you're driving effectively. If you're driving 25 miles an hour, we see a lot of crashes taking place in the city because of excessive speeding. It needs to be reduced. I've been trying to do that for a number of years now.
Okay, thank you. I'd love to have these meetings like every month with these guys. So this is great. I think my perception for the bikers and mopeders and scooters and those folks, not one of them, I ride e-scooter as well, is that I think that perception is that I can do what I want, whatever I want to do in Boston. I thought that, and I think coming to this meeting kind of confirmed it. Just a few weeks ago, my wife and I, we live in the Lane Tower. We look right up, my window happens to look right at the steps, it's corner of Franklin and Washington. And any minute of the day, I love seeing the people coming back, like Nichols. Love it, but every couple minutes, there's a gasoline scooters. I mean, those go, well over 45, probably, miles per hour, right? And I'm just shaking my head. And just a few weeks ago, we're just walking out of the Millennium Tower, heading towards this way, and right in front of Primark. I'm about Primark location on Washington. I can see from down here, probably at this corner, I can see a gasoline motor scooter just pull up, just speeding down towards us, going northbound, and blowing his little beep, 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 horn all the way so people could get out of his way. And he's pretty much max speed. So I got near him and said, slow the F down. And then he just going, passing and all the way north towards Old South Meeting House. So I was like, I couldn't believe it. Not less than 20 feet down, probably where the flower shop is, where the Macy's is, 2 transit police vehicles parked with 2 transit police officers inside the vehicles on their laptops. So I walked up to them, tapped on the hood, which pissed one of those guys off. And we stood there for a 15-minute lively conversation. And basically what I learned is that they can't do anything they're not gonna do anything, and just move on. I mean, he felt my pain, but he said he couldn't do anything. They couldn't do anything. One thing I thought is, okay, you have two guys sitting right in front of Snipes. I think it's like, before the Snipes open. Why couldn't one guy sit at George Howell Coffee and the other guy sit at Old South Meeting House? And if the first guy sees a motor scooter passing by at Snipes, why couldn't he just radio down to Old South and say, pull this guy over? Is that hard to do? Question number one. Rolling roadblocks with so much density and traffic flowing one way. If he's going in, he's gonna come out at the other end. So having two police officers sitting right next to each other on their laptops in front of Snipes isn't helping us, the residents in this room, and my family, my wife at home. Question number one.
Thank you.
When I was in high school, I hated cops, but at my age now, I love you guys. I want to see more of you guys. So maybe a question to councilman. The one gig that's closed, can we turn that into Cafe Blue? Have free donuts, have cops inside drinking coffee? Can we get them over here? Is there any way possible to have a police kiosk, like that flower shop, where it's nice and warm in the winter, cool in the summertime? I will bring donuts every day. If we could just have cops there full time, is that possible? I love cops. Cafe Blue. Cafe Blue. What's your name? Okay. I was kind of stunned to hear about your practice of just giving out warnings instead of tickets. Wallet will probably change their behaviors. So I don't understand this thought of, well, we'll just give them a warning so that they don't get hit on their insurance. Where does that idea come from? And I think we need to stop that. That's it. I'd love to have this meeting again next month.
Another ball for me. At least the first one's the MBTA police. And
Yeah, right.
so I won't, I'll say law enforcement in general. So the scooters, enforcement of scooters, if we could radio ahead and stop them, 100%. Right? That's a 100% opportunity for us to stop them. We call, turn your lights on, sirens on, we call lighting up, right? Light up, turn your lights on. For I'm going to say 1.5 of the bikes, so obviously motorcycles, scooters,
Gasoline.
the gasoline conveyance, more than half just take off on us. They just drive away.
But if they have a license plate.
They're supposed to.
So they're supposed to have, yeah, so anything under 50 cc, state law requires a registration sticker.
Are they licensed?
They don't have to be. So over 16 is the motorized scooter and motorized bicycle laws. It's motorized bicycle is kind of a generic term that gets used. Motorized scooter is anything with wheels and a motor. It gets a little bit convoluted in the law. So there's laws that say you don't have to have a license to drive a moped. But if you have a suspended driver's license, then you're not allowed to drive a moped. So not having one at all is no problem, but having a suspended regular driver's license, you can't drive. It's just the laws kind of fight each other a little bit. In terms of stuff like the dirt bikes we saw, we don't even bother trying to. Those guys will do circles around us trying to get us to
Any
chase
spike
them.
strips? Can we buy you some spike strips?
Can't. It is so dangerous
Why can't you have
on two wheels. So what happens was if we spike strip that person, then they sue the city, they sue the police, they sue everybody. Even though they're the ones doing unlawful behavior.
So they're in charge.
So we can do anything.
Voluntary.
No, it's not that we can't do anything.
No.
It's just
They can do anything. They can do anything.
they feel empowered to. They feel empowered to. I think Broude just went through a very large off-road vehicle sting where they got the state police helicopters basically to follow dirt bikes around and they ran out of gas. And then the cruisers would just drive up and ground them. One dirt bike, I think it's, $4 or $5 grand an hour on a state police helicopter. I mean, it's very labor intensive, resource intensive to go after these bikes. But the same reason is if a police officer, we'll use the woman with the stroller, right? Comes out of the sidewalk, if we're chasing a scooter or a dirt bike or gasoline engine vehicle, and we hit that person, there is no scooter in the world or the police officer striking the pedestrian with their cruiser, trying to go after one bike. It's not a popular answer. We have to weigh the risks. We have to weigh the risk. We create more of an emergency by doing that. And so if we get the person to stop, absolutely. Majority of these people who are driving around down there, and most of them are younger people, they know if they just run from us, we're not going to chase them. We've kind of created that catch-22 here.
Let me follow up briefly. You know, we almost, and thank you, Sergeant, for the incredible work you do and the A1 team, but we were about one vote short of cutting $30 million from the Boston Police Department budget several months ago. And we almost didn't fund the brick. We barely got it passed. But let me challenge you for this upcoming election. Are you going to pick up the phone and call your elected official, city councilor, and ask them to support more police in the downtown area, to support more police in the city of Boston? Because if you don't do that, you might have city councilors that do not want more police officers in the city. And from what I'm hearing tonight, that's exactly what you want more police officers in the city. Yes. You want more police officers in downtown. You want them walking the beat. You want them doing community policing.
I'll buy you donuts.
But here's my point. It's up to you to weigh in and to pick up the phone and to walk up to City Hall and to ask your city councilor, do you support more police officers in the city of Boston? That's how I would base my decision on voting for someone. If they're going to support your neighborhood. I'm not telling you what to do, but if I were in your shoes, I would want to know if people on the Boston City Council want more police officers or not. Thank you.
Good opportunity for me to reflag on Tuesday, October 24th. We're going to have an at-large candidate forum, which will include the opportunity for people to speak one-on-one with the candidates, and you can ask questions of concern like that.
So one other brief response to the question. I mean, I think there are design changes that we can pursue, particularly in the pedestrian zone. I know it's something that the Chief's Department is looking at, be it as a stakeholder. I don't know if she's still here, but Anita Larcell from our staff, our Director of Planning, is working with BTD. So the downtown streets reconstruction is planning to reconstruct the streets and sidewalks throughout the entire Ladder District and down Washington Street from Temple Place to School Street. Sorely needed. I think we all know that, both from a streets standpoint and from a sidewalk standpoint. That is slated for the next few years. The Chief can give a more specific answer about exactly when that will happen. But I think there are some design changes, including perhaps a system of infrastructure, like I led off with tonight, about restricting wholly or at certain parts of the day, certain types of traffic into the pedestrian zone. It's not going to get everything. It's certainly not going to get a scooter at a high rate of speed. But there are leading examples of what good, smart downtowns are doing around the country, around the world, that I think we will mimic in this plan and have a sensible set of rules and a belief of how it will be enforced, and whether that's sort of, through new jurisdictional conversations or through a stepped up infrastructure. I think there are some things that we can do. It won't be overnight, but we're not the only city grappling with this in the country, and so I think it will get better, but it won't be.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great point, and I think we are, as part of our work on downtown Crossen and looking at redesigning and rebuilding many of the streets in downtown, starting with the question of how do we make the pedestrian zone access control more effective. Right, what we have right now does not work well. It's largely City Hall staffers on their way to work and stop and push the orange barricades back into place every morning, which is a absurd way to try to ensure that this pedestrian space stays for pedestrians. So we are doing an evaluation of some of the different design and technological options, but I want to say, right, the biggest challenge here, this is a somewhat solved problem in the rest of the world. You can go, even places with heavy winters like Montreal have, it's a robust menu of options for movable bollards or gates or things that can actually physically control access. The challenge we run into is the operational challenge. right? The businesses in downtown Crossen have gotten very used to being able to get a delivery at any time of day, not just before 11 a.m. when it is actually allowed. Residents, in some cases, may be driving through there. We have services like deliveries, on-demand deliveries that are taking place out of downtown Crossen, which are I think sometimes it's a question, right? Do we want to tell a business, no, you can't get a delivery, you cannot make a food delivery from your restaurant during these hours because getting a motorized vehicle into this neighborhood is not allowed, right? So there's a lot of policy questions that I think we need to wrestle with and really work with the businesses, work with the residents to make sure that any access control system that we develop actually meets people's needs and strikes the right balance, but that's work that we are very excited to do because it's so essential to the quality of that public space.
Thank you, Chief. So we do want to eventually send you all home to your families. We're over a bit on time. We'll do one or two more very quick questions. I'll encourage that you be brief with your questions and Rishi will pick folks. I will also say, I think from the association's perspective, we've heard lots of places where there's good follow-up items that are state level issues that are not necessarily sort of appropriate as panelists. We'll look to see if we can convene folks around those kind of topics. And obviously we'll be reviewing the recording and just all of those who are taking particular topics that we want to get follow-up for. Rishi, do you want to?
Yeah, Rishi, push us on.
So I just want to share from my perspective, the behavior that makes me the most fearful is a frustrated driver. So if a driver, someone double parks, a car needs to get or wants to get around them and doesn't want to wait, they'll accelerate really aggressively. They'll whip around, there are blind spots then. That scenario is just the one where when a driver's annoyed, they're not behaving in a predictable way. And I heard early on, there's at least 3 different departments that can offer tickets and citations for the double parking. Also double parking truck straight blind spots as a pedestrian, I have to stick my head out around it before I know if someone's whipping around. Can these departments coordinate to do more enforcement? So like the police have to go to do a domestic violence call, can BTV step up more? Can the transit police step up more? I don't know, it sounded like a source of dysfunction, there's multiple agencies, but it feels like it could be more robust instead. And is there any plan or vision there?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for the MBTA police, but I will say, right, we view this as a series of overlapping and cooperatively overlapping jurisdictions, right? It is a good thing that there are multiple agencies that can write a ticket for somebody who's parked in a crosswalk. We are not staffed within BTD's enforcement division at the level we need to be. I talked about this a little bit earlier. Pre-pandemic, the division had about 130, 140 parking meter supervisors in it. That number has subsequently, over the course of 2020, 2021, dropped down below 100. So we are trying to get that strength back up. One of the things that we want to do with those increased numbers is to do more of this sort of targeted enforcement. When we identify hotspots in particular areas, we actually did a pilot this summer, even with our limited strength, of doing enhanced enforcement for food delivery app drivers who were parking illegally on some key hotspot areas, including in downtown Crossen. We wrote a lot of tickets and we moved a lot of drivers along, and we did not succeed in changing behavior. So there is a whole conversation about how to deal with delivery services and the way that their drivers and their riders operate on our streets. That's I think a little bit different than or needs to be a little different than the conversation we have about the general public. But more enforcement when it comes to writing tickets, especially for the violations that result in safety hazards, is absolutely on the docket. And as we build our team, we'll be able to issue more of those.
So my question was that I was listening earlier as we were talking about, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
We were talking about like 18-wheelers, parking in either bike lanes or I've even seen some trucks park up on the sidewalk as well. I do software for like a logistics company, a furniture logistics company, and one of the things we talk about a lot is last mile operations. And I guess my main question is, in terms of the city, Councilor Flynn, or anybody else who wants to weigh in, has any thought been put into some sort of pilot program for kind of small, compact last mile centers, maybe that are close to transit or other sort of distribution hubs that can help transport these goods to these businesses, like in the final stretch, without needing to resort to like a car or an 18-wheeler or a truck or anything like that?
Yeah, I'll just jump in really quick and say, I mean, the bid is interested in that. We've heard from other cities where you could have overnight deliveries to strategic logistics centers that then get smaller vehicles. And again, I think it's the theme of the night. Paris has this system and has deployed it quite well, where they're making most deliveries into a larger warehouse located outside the city center, and then completing the last mile in fairly small vehicles. And so it's something we're inspired by. Actually, I think it might be one of the silver linings of COVID that as we may now have higher vacancy, both storefront and soon to be, I think, at the office space level, we could have some large format spaces available in the downtown that could serve as sort of that central hub for this type of thing. So I think we're very interested in a conversation about how to remove a number of the smaller vehicles. We of course have to start by talking to our retailers. You know, we have at least 2 of our really phenomenal restaurateurs in the house tonight. And so while our restaurants tend to have more odd hours than some of the daytime retail, and so it might be easier for some of them. I think we'd be very, sensitive to the needs of the retailers in the downtown area. But all of what we're talking about tonight in terms of access control into the ped zone and last mile deliveries, both to residential and commercial entities, and even our office buildings, I think could really benefit from some innovative thinking.
We are currently running a pilot in Alston called Boston Delivers. This is using a grant from the Mass Clean Energy Center. We've worked with a contracted delivery provider to offer a alternative to the kind of gig economy delivery services to restaurants and small businesses in Alston. So we have a small fleet of electric cargo bikes and people who are staff, so they are paid by the company by the delivery service rather than being this kind of gig worker that has no incentive to care about safety or some of the other things that come along with that. So this just launched about a month ago, and it's giving us a little bit of experience in what it's like to see these kind of alternative delivery form factors work on city streets, what works, what do businesses think about it. What I will say, I've spent a bit of time looking at this in other places. New York has run a couple of pilots around this. Los Angeles is working on a pilot around this. Where this has been successful, it has been because there are sticks, not just carrots, right? If you are UPS, if you are Dunkin' Donuts, if you are a large company, all of your financial incentives line up against sort of pushing the costs of your delivery out into the public in the form of large vehicles and the kind of driving that ultimately creates problems for people on foot and safety concerns. The way that Paris has done this is by banning vehicles from streets. And we do not have the legal authority to do that here in Boston. So we are trying to pilot to learn what might work and the operational models around this. But without some legislative action, we're going to be pretty tied in the things that we can require of the companies doing business.
And to the chief's point, if you want a good laugh, and it's not funny, but we have to laugh, otherwise we'll blow our hair out. Look at the next UPS truck and count the number of tickets in their windshield. Like, I asked one of the drivers one time, I said, hey, like, do you pay these, or how would you, like, it's back into the cost of fuel and insurance and tickets, and it's just part of doing business for them. So getting them more tickets doesn't make a difference to them. It's just, right? It's just the cost of doing their business. So it's gonna have to be something legislative that changes, because obviously we just can't keep them tickets because they don't care.
Final question? Yes, so I just wanted to bring to attention this intersection of Tremont and Boylston Street. So whenever I want to take that left, the green light only turns green when the pedestrian light is also on go. Simple thing to change, but I don't know. It's just pedestrian safety.
Yeah, so that's an intersection that we need to take a look at under a new signal guidelines. One of the changes we made with these guidelines is to look at the volume of pedestrian crossings and to severely restrict what that's called is a concurrent green, where the walk is concurrent with the green signal, and so you get vehicles turning across. Our new guidelines limit where and when we do that. Now, it will take time for us to roll those out into every intersection in the city, but that is one that we've heard a lot about and know that we need to make changes to, so thank you for flagging that. We're also missing a couple of other things in that intersection for the new guidelines. We've got some work to do.
That issue you highlighted is a major concern throughout the city. If it were up to me right now, I would ensure that pedestrians have the right of way, not both the pedestrian and the vehicle. You can't, both of them can't have the right of way, one at a time. That's a major recipe for an accident. And we've seen accidents on Summer Street in South Boston, on Melcher Street area. And, you know, I think we have to make sure that we stop that immediately. We can't have it both ways. We have to make sure if we're talking about pedestrian safety, then let's support pedestrians and give the pedestrians the right of way. After the pedestrian crosses, then the signal will change, give the vehicle the opportunity to turn. But both cannot have access at the same time. It's unfair, it's unsafe, and it's a recipe for disaster.
That particular intersection being one of the highest volume pedestrian traffic sort of conflict zones, is there a timeline for when the city is?
I don't have a specific timeline for you. I think we need to do a little bit of analysis there. If I'm remembering the history of that intersection correctly, there is an exclusive pedestrian phase at that intersection, and there is a concurrent crossing phase. So there is a period of time where only pedestrians are allowed to move. In some cases, the challenge with signals is always about if you make pedestrians wait too long, they do not wait and they cross against the signal. And so it is always a balancing act of saying, okay, if we have, we move 14,000 vehicles a day through that intersection. So how do we give enough time for those cars to move while keeping pedestrians safe, while also making sure that there is that we're not asking pedestrians to wait so long that they end up crossing against the signal. This is the balancing act we're always trying to strike. Something we've done in a couple of places, actually often along with a bike and multimodal project, is to create a protected turn. So what we would do is we allow through traffic to go, we hold left-turning vehicles on a red arrow, and then once most of the traffic is gone, we can let pedestrians go at the same time as the cars going straight. Then we allow the vehicles to turn left once pedestrians are held. So there's these more complex signal designs. Long-winded way of saying this stuff gets pretty complicated pretty quickly, but this is on our radar, and I hope that within the next couple of years we'll be able to do some.
Chief, on that though, we can't wait a couple of years. We have to make that change immediately. The chief knows I've advocated for that change for a long period of time. For a senior walking across the street in the crosswalk, and then the car having the same opportunity to turn, or a person with disabilities in the crosswalk, or a mother with their little kids in the car turning at the same time, we can't have that. If the car has to wait an extra 15 seconds or 20 seconds, well then the car has to wait. But the priority is to the person, the pedestrian, to the senior, to the person with disabilities, to the parent with the little kids. Those are the priorities we have to ensure are part of this discussion. But we can't wait 2 years to make that change. That change needs to be made yesterday.
We already have Fremont turning onto School Street with all your left turn signal. It works.
Many of you on Congress Street and High Street is also a similar situation, but it's we can't do that.
Remember on Broude Street used to be all flights would change up, stop sign, all cars would stop, and then the crosswalks would all be open to everybody to cross, and then the traffic would go back to normal. That was for years down at this corner. Never a problem.
That still exists. There's just an additional phase in which we allow pedestrians to cross.
All for it. On rare occasions, though, it's further out. It's not like it used to be. It's much more synchronized.
It does have an exclusive period on the signals. Now, we'll take a look at that intersection.
It's horrible.
There may be some things that we can do just by adjusting the timing. There may be some things that require physical construction. That's frequently the case with our signal system, and hence the longer timelines and the higher costs. But we can definitely take a look to see excuse me, what's achievable with the existing signal infrastructure, and then potentially later on some additional.
One last question though, when are you gonna pave the streets, honestly? They're falling apart, it's embarrassing.
We do pave the streets.
But where? In our neighborhood, never.
We do pave in every neighborhood, we patch utility work.
It's caving in, it's collapsing.
I'm on Crossen, they pave it like every month, it's really frustrating.
It's collapsing.
By
the way, the streets are collapsing in the city, it's embarrassing.
I agree. I think we have a tremendous backlog of pavement quality and sidewalk quality issues in the city. If we were to fix all of those, we would probably be spending several $1 billion citywide to do that work.
Did you see West Street here? You cannot drive.
I understand, we can definitely take a look at West Street. What we do is every year we build a paving map across our 800 miles of streets that we have across the city of Boston using what's called the Pavement Condition Index that measures the quality of the pavement, the disruptions there. We also have to match it with utility work because the thing we do not want to do is to pave a street right before National Grid comes and rips it up. And so sometimes what we have, and I don't know the specific situation on West Street, but sometimes what we have is that we have a street that has been in queue for paving but has repeated utility projects that are scheduled, and so we hold off often much longer than we would like before we're able to get in there because we don't want to have it get torn up again. So we do pave streets, we do miles of streets every year, we do patching every year. I appreciate that you're frustrated and that you have not seen that street be repaved, but I will make sure we take a look at it as we build out our 2024.
Look behind the Customs Towers, you can't even drive for 2 miles.
So it's clear we could keep going all night. I'm going to encourage that we do this again. I hope you'll let us have you back again. I want to thank all of our panelists and certainly everyone, especially who stayed so long ago. I also want to thank Franklin and Emily from the Suffolk Modern Theater staff. Thank you so much for making this happen. I appreciate you being part of this. I will remind everyone on our website, bosdowntown.org, you can register for the October 24th at-large candidate forum. Heard lots of reasons why folks should care about who are our elected representatives, so I hope people will come out and avail yourself of the opportunity to talk to candidates. Please go out, go enjoy one of our downtown restaurants, go get a drink, have dinner, go home to your families, do something other than talk about transportation for at least 20 minutes.
You just can't stay here.
Yeah, you just can't stay here.